Good afternoon, and good morning to our West Coast listeners, and especially our guest who's on the West Coast today. I want to welcome Jason Kaune, who is the chair of the ABA Standing Committee on Election Law. Jason is a longtime election law lawyer and advisor and legal counsel to corporate America, corporations in particular, nonprofit organizations, and political campaigns and candidates over the years. His firm represents a multitude of companies who are in front of governmental agencies across the country. So he is an expert in election and all things.
So Juan, you cut off there a little at the end.
Oh, I said, welcome to our chair chat. Can you hear me?
Well, thank you. So let me accept the welcome. It's great to be here. Crazy time for an election lawyer to be talking, but there we are.
Yes. Well, Jason, we are 6 weeks out. We are 6 days out. Let me get my calendar right. We are 6 days away from the midterm elections. Early voting has already started in most states around the country that allow early voting. And I'm wondering, what is the work of the Election Law Standing Committee of the American Bar Association?
Well, there you go. Well, to answer that question, we look back, not these next days, but way back. The Standing Committee was created after the Watergate scandals, another time when we were paying a lot of attention to elections and issues around them. And so it's a standing committee that is made up of a bipartisan and multi-partisan balance. And its whole mission is to look at election law issues. And we'll talk about some of those issues and what they are. It's a collegial group of people who either are election lawyers themselves full-time or have interests in it or around it. And we look at issues for policy and programming for the ABA.
So people will understand specifically, your committee does not actually work on elections per se. They do more policy and more case law work around litigation, policy, crafting policies around making sure that our process is fair and transparent. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. We all have our day jobs, so we have clients that we're representing. But on this committee, our client is the ABA, and the ABA speaks out on elections. So we work on policy along with sections.
Right.
We worked on the Moore v. Harper brief that the ABA just submitted on the independent legislature theory. We do programming. So yes, we work with the bar and across different areas of the bar on all things elections.
Well, as you well know, there's been an attack and an assault on our U.S. elections, on the integrity of our elections. So what is the current work that your committee is doing in response to those specific attacks and assaults on the integrity of our election process?
Yeah, the word is integrity, and it's part of our mission is to make sure elections work and work better, right? The integrity of our elections is strong. Our elections work well, but that doesn't mean they can't be better. So our job is to try to find some common ground of how to do that. And there are three ways I'll share. One, we can be experts that try to follow these things. And if you go to our website, we had kept a list of all the cases that came out of the 2020 election. Stay tuned. We're going to have something up about the cases that are now going in advance of this election. Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Read the headlines just this week, so we can follow the cases. We can work on policy. And you and I were talking a few minutes ago, we're hoping to take on campaign finance again as a group, that it's time, given everything that's happened, to take a look at campaign finance laws and see if there's some common ground reforms. And then we do, like I said, policy. And one thing we are really focused on for the integrity of elections is we issue a series of election administration guidelines. And after every election, try to improve them. We share them with the secretaries of state. We listen and try to put best practices into place. And so we just did some work on disinformation and Native American voting, particularly with mail ballots. It's a challenge to that community. And we're going to be looking at poll worker standards and the disability community in voting. Hawaii did this really interesting experiment with online voting for the disability community. That maybe that's our future, Juan.
Right, right. You know, you mentioned mail-in voting. You and I were both in Portland last month, or at the end of September, actually, for our fall meeting. And I had an opportunity, I think you were there as well. We toured the Secretary of State's office and their voting, apparatus. And I was fascinated to learn that over 90% of Oregon residents are registered to vote. And of that number, about 85 to 80% of the vote of those persons turn in a mail-in ballot. Do you see that as a wave of the future that you think will help either advance our voting rights and integrity in the process, or do you see some challenges there?
Well, I mean, I see both, right? Oregon was all mail voting way before the pandemic and way before everyone else did it. So it was a great experience to walk through it, because they've been dealing with a lot of these issues that are getting litigated now in other places because it's new to them. So yeah, in a way, it's the wave of the future. But you and I were talking in Portland about it on the side, and I just mentioned the Hawaii online voting. I also think you got to think about the future, that we're depending on the U.S. Postal Service to be our, delivery of, and I don't mean to assuage, the Postal Service is awesome. It's great we have them. That may not be the future, and maybe there are different ways to vote.
Right. So with online voting, if I could just follow up with that point that you made, a lot of us vote online for bar elections. I know in my state bar here in Illinois, we vote for our officers online. I've done other online balloting in other organizations. Do you think that is a viable option in the context of how do people who don't have access to the internet and Wi-Fi, how would they vote given those parameters? And I'm thinking that in the context of the theme of our year is our section this year is economic justice. And so people who can't afford a computer or don't have access to technology, how would they be impacted by online voting?
I think it's a good question. I mean, my personal view is there should be many options for people to vote.
Okay.
And no one size fits all. The electronic voting that I thought was interesting to the disabled community and the unintended consequence of mail voting is what that community is saying is, wait a second, mail-in voting is a more accessible way for people to vote if you're able to fill out the forms and whatnot. We rely on going to a voting place and getting help and assistance. And so, whether that's online or making sure we have voting centers, I think there has to be different ways to vote.
Right. That being one of the options, right? One
of the options.
Well, is there anything that you're particularly looking or focused on over the next 6 days with respect to our election integrity kind of overall process that you'll be watching for or looking for between now and the midterms next Tuesday?
Yeah, we're all focused on the results of the elections, but what I mentioned and what I encourage everyone to do is, we do live in a hyper-partisan time, and there's so much coverage of some of these cases going on. We're lawyers on this call. Stop and take a look at some of these cases because they're really interesting, right? We've changed the rules of elections. Put aside all the politics of it. The reality is we've changed the rules of elections. Whenever you change rules, you're going to discover unintended consequences and problems, and people are going to litigate over that. And there's a lot out there. What's happening in Arizona, there's the poll watchers thing, but there's also a poll workers case about suing the election offices to make sure there's balance in poll workers. Really interesting issues underneath the headlines, right? I'd encourage people to look at some of those. It's not all, we're changing our election system, and those of us who practice are watching that closely because it changes the way, we vote. Yeah.
So you mentioned 2 of those cases. Are there some specific names of cases that you would want us to look at, or just generally just look at some of these cases more broadly?
Yeah, boy, I didn't pull up the names of the cases
Okay.
in front of me. The Arizona case was brought by the RNC against Maricopa County.
Okay.
If you go to the headlines, there's the ongoing Pennsylvania case, and
Right.
it's just a really interesting case because it's about when you mail in your ballots. Right now, the rule generally is as long as it gets to the election office, it's different by states. Let's say by 7 days or whatnot,
Right.
you're in because you got it in, conceivably before the election. But they're battling over there about if you filled in the date when you sent it in so that they have something to
Yeah,
verify.
I've seen that. Yeah.
So, these are interesting. These are lawyers arguing over
Right.
those
Right.
types of issues.
Right.
And it's going to state Supreme Courts, it's going to federal courts.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you've answered my next question by suggesting how lawyers can kind of be involved and kind of learn more about these issues by looking at the pending cases. Are there other ways you think lawyers can be helpful in this process, particularly not just between now and election day, being up to speed on the issues, even some lawyers doing election protection work,
Yep.
but beyond Tuesday, what role do you see lawyers playing, particularly lawyers who are part of the American Bar Association and also our Civil Rights and Social Justice section?
Yeah. Well, don't dismiss the voter protection work. Sign up, and our committee sponsors the Poll Workers Esquire program, which is
Right.
the nonpartisan. Just go and work. And
how can they sign up for that?
So there's a link. If you go to our website, there's
Okay.
a link to it. And
Okay.
this is all about lawyers have the skills to do this. So there's that. But your question is how more broadly? And it's kind of what I was suggesting before. All laws need updating. And you were asking about projects we're doing. One of the projects we're doing as a committee on social justice is gender parity in elections. And there's the issue of being open to vote, but you got to get into office. And there are laws. The focus that one of our members was working on was campaign finance laws for daycare. And for, if you're running for office, it used to be a lot of the personal use laws said you can't use it for daycare. Well, wait a second, how is you as a young mom or parent going to do that? So there are a lot of laws that were written. I talked about Watergate before in the 1970s. At a time, our structures were different. Our family structures were different.
Right.
So, there are laws to improve here.
Right.
That's what I'd encourage lawyers to think about and get involved.
That's wonderful. That's great. And what is your website? What's the address to your website?
Well, if you Google ABA Standing Committee on Election Law,
Okay, it'll pop up.
It'll pop up.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll just let people do that, and we'll just encourage folks to Google ABA Standing Committee on Election Law.
Yep.
So let me ask you this, going back to our section's theme of economic justice. Is it your view, particularly given your vast experience in election law over the years and your practice, are the resources for elections underfunded? Do we need more money put into our electoral process, like polling stations, balloting, just the infrastructure of the election process? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do believe in the word is infrastructure. This is essential. It's like our schools and police, and there are certain things you got to do right. And I think, unfortunately, what we've done is you mentioned it before. Our elections are localized. The Constitution has a federal role and a state role, but reserves to the state the time, place, and manner of elections, and it's local. And that's where that funding and resource needs to be. We just saw an incredible election office in Portland. If you come to ABA conferences, by the way, our committee and the and sponsored by the state and local government section do these tours. Look for them on your program. We did one in Chicago. These offices are incredibly well run by professionals who really care what they do, and they need resources to do it well. So absolutely, and I think we've gotten caught up in, we have the Federal Election Assistance Commission that does some grant work, and it's not the most efficient system in the world right now. Right.
Well, that your answer kind of reminds me of the debate we hear around the country. It's a bit of a partisan debate about nationalizing or federalizing our election process versus, state control, state rights, that kind of debate. Does the ABA have policy on that specific issue that you're aware of that you could speak to?
It has, but not, I don't think as much globally as on a case by case. So we addressed that issue many times in the election administration guidelines in terms of, and the ABA has taken position before. There was the Supreme Court case on, I'm trying to remember the name, about purging election rolls, and to what degree does the, does the Voting Rights Act and HAVA dictate the parameters versus what you can do locally. I mean, the case went to the Supreme Court. We have problems there and tensions between what is done and not. But in the end, you got to give those local people the resources they need to do their jobs well. Right.
They need not only the resources, but they also need to feel safe and secure in the work they're doing.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we can do in terms of policy to help our election workers feel safe?
There's a lot of talk about that now, and given the violence we've seen, states are doing different things. Here in California, the legislature added election workers into the same categories as DAs, so that their addresses are protected and other protections are there. I think that's a great idea and important. And I just think you started with it. We also have to ratchet down the intensity and the anger. And I just wish everyone could walk into an election office like we had. And actually, that was one story the fellow there told us, which I appreciated, is, the local Republican Party had some, new people in it who were very skeptical. And his answer to it was to invite them in. Say, spend a day with me. Let me show you how this machine works. You gotta do things like that.
You're absolutely right about that. So, Jason, tell me this. You are an election law lawyer. You're an expert in your chosen field of the practice area. But tell us something about you that most of us don't know.
There we go. Well, all right. I'm in California, and it's California my background. But I think I shared with you one when we saw each other before. My boys go to, or high school boys go to school in Hawaii. And this was something that started before the pandemic, and there's a long story behind it. But so I am a tri-coastal commuter. I get to Hawaii to see my family. I'm here in California, and then election law being election law, I have to go the other way all the time. So there's something people probably don't know about me. I don't have a Hawaiian shirt on. I don't seem very Hawaiian, but we've got some family roots there.
And I was like, you don't drop them off every morning. That's a heck of
that would be too much of a commute.
Right. Well, I'm sure they are enjoying the weather and going to school out in Hawaii. That must be a wonderful opportunity for them.
Yeah, although everything has its price. For those watching Hawaii right now, it's the Big Island. The volcano's about to go, Mauna Loa. There's been a whole series of earthquakes. So, paradise has its cost.
Well, I also like to ask our guest, what is the last book you read, or what book are you reading right now, besides some election code?
Well, there you go. And apropos of our bipartisan spirit, I've actually got two on my desk, and this is for real. My father-in-law gave me the latest Felix Frankfurter book, Democratic Justice, Felix Frankfurter in the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
I'm excited to do that, open that next. But I'm finishing up Bill Barr's book about his time in the administration, called One Damn Thing After Another. and the writing is just like the title. It's actually a very interesting read. So
do you know Mr. Barr, former Attorney General?
I've met him, and he was actually counsel in a company before he went back. So his personality.
Right. Well, I've heard good things about his book, about the stories he tells.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. Let's put
That's
it like
what I've
that.
heard. Yeah. So what do you do for fun, Jason?
Oh, well, I sort of let that cat out of the bag. I get over and see my boys as much as possible, and in paradise in Hawaii.
That's great. That's great. And then my last question with respect to our today's chair chat, if you could wake up tomorrow and be anything except an election law lawyer, what would you be?
So, you said I've been practicing for a long time, and I've been practicing for 25 years. So I'm in that time of life you start thinking about, well, what comes next? And I'm actually, for the first time, I've lectured law school classes before, but I'm going to teach a course on political ethics this next year. So I get to find out, Juan, if I'm any good at teaching, and maybe I'll wake up in the morning and say, oh,
I want to be a professor, right?
But in the meantime, I got to earn money and,
Right.
work in elections.
Well, that's great. We definitely need ethics in our political system. And so I want to give you just the last word to kind of just offer a parting thought on what lawyers should be doing between now and next Tuesday, and just the importance of the work you're doing. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share on behalf of the Standing Committee on Election Law?
No, I appreciate that. Well, and I appreciate this. If there's one thing I'd say, we were talking before, too, is I'm on a local school board, right? And we live in these hyper-partisan times. And what I would urge all lawyers to do, and we happen to be a bunch of lawyers, we lawyers are taught how to confront each other, face difficult issues and fight it out, but be civil and be professional. And I think we have a role to model that behavior in a time when people are not. If there's anything, what I love about this committee is we are conservatives to progressives, and we can have those conversations. And the bar is a great place to do that, right? To bring us together. All lawyers should be modeling that behavior in their communities and with each other. Find someone who disagrees with you and talk it out like lawyers can, right? If you can do it on a contract, you can do it on
policy. Do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's great. That's, is one of the C's of our ABA president, Deborah Nix Ross. One of her C's is civility.
Yeah.
And
I think that's going to be one of the themes of the next conference. I just heard some of the annual is the next one, or the mid-year, whatever, which one's
mid-year's next.
Mid-year. Right. It's going to be a focus. Yeah.
That's important. That's really good. It's really important to highlight, because I think lawyers can play that role in being that example in your local community of what it means to disagree, to debate, to engage in a civil and professional manner, because we do it in our profession every day.
That's right. That's right. And we can do it in politics. Sometimes it's not easy and you have to take a breath, but we can do it.
Right. Well, Jason, thank you for your time. Next time we have you over, we'll talk more about the school board. You and I have that in common. I spent 5 years on my local school board in my hometown, so I feel your pain.
Yeah, no, I'd like to share stories. Doing it during a pandemic was not a treat.
I'm sure. Well, I want to thank you for being our guest this afternoon, and just want to thank all of you for joining us today. Again, my name is Juan Thomas, the honor of serving as chair of the ABA Civil Rights Social Justice section. I just want to encourage all of you who are listening to our chair chat today, if you hear it live or before November 8th, please get out and exercise your right to vote. We also encourage you to volunteer to be an election protection work through our civil rights and social justice section, and also through the work of the standing committee, a poll worker, a poll watcher, correct?
Poll worker, yep.
Poll worker. So please engage the process. Our democracy matters, and the role lawyers play is extremely important. So thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful rest of